Hey, welcome to the Tales of a Gearhead podcast. This is brought to you by Cornwell Tools. They're the choice of professionals since 1919. Can you believe that? 1919. It's over 100 years building tools. I'm your host, Stacey David. All right, let's get rolling. You know, people ask all the time how you pick colors for a project. And that's really an interesting question because everybody takes a little different approach to this. I was on a panel at a show that we were doing in LA, and it was Dave Kindig and Chip Foose and Bobby Alloway and a bunch of friends of mine in the industry. And they were asking, I think Horny Mike was on there from Counting Cars. You can't say, Horny Mike without laughing, And if you've met Mike, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The guy's a hoot. Anyway, a guy asked that question. He said, how do you pick the colors for your project? And the answers are very interesting because there's certain builders, like Bobby Alloway, most of his stuff is black. And that's just kind of his color, and the guy's brilliant at doing black cars. Dave was saying that he kind of leans more toward red. And, of course, Horny Mike works with green all the time. My approach and Chip's approach and several other guys, we're more like the project kind of dictates the color. That's the way that I recommend you guys approach a project. In other words, as you're putting a project together, the attitude and the look and the motor and everything that you're putting together will kind of dictate what color that car is going to be. For example, when I was laying out the V8 Interceptor, the Mercury Cougar, with the stacks coming out of the hood and everything, that car was going to be black no matter what. And it was kind of the idea of like if Darth Vader drove a car, what would he drive? That's what I'm building. No other color would work on that car with the vision that I had in mind with it. With Sergeant Rock, we created that color. I wanted something that was kind of like a battleship gray, metallic, with a tint of green to it to add to kind of the Army deal. So we created that color. That's where that came from. So the vehicle for me always kind of dictates the color because the color will change the personality of the whole build just like a set of wheels and tires will. So as you guys are planning out your projects and you're looking at things, take some time to go through some color palettes and really imagine things. There's some great websites that you can go on that put some different colors on it and some wheels and tires and kind of get an idea of what you're looking at. Then, once you decide your color, you're good to go. You can jump forward on it. But as you do that, remember, when you're deciding your color, don't forget to think about the color of your motor and your chassis. Because there's two schools of thoughts here. Sometimes it's great to build something and everything be the same color. You paint the motor block, everything the same color as the car, and you have that real monochromatic look. And then other times it's great to have an accenting color. So when you pop the hood, the motor jumps at you. That's more how I generally approach it. I like when people to look at a vehicle that I've built, that the vehicle will grab them in some sort of way. And then when they pop the hood, that's a whole nother treat. It's like, whoa, now look at this. It's like, this is something that you didn't expect. The interior is the same way. Go into the interior, I want people to go, wow, this is really well thought out. And sometimes it's very similar. Sometimes it's, completely opposite. It's very important the way you pick your colors. If you're doing something in a red, you probably don't want something similar in the color palette under the hood, unless you're going exactly the same color. You will find that there's kind of no rules. With everything that you say, as soon as you lay a rule down, thou shalt not use this color with this color, somebody will do it and win big awards with it. You just have to kind of experiment with it. Go with your gut feeling. Be creative. That's what this is all about. Well, I'm sure that everybody's heard the news. It's not really new now. It's been out a while. The passing of Chuck Yeager. Good night. What can you say about Chuck Yeager that's not like just patriotic, man? What a guy. Now, for those of you that don't know who Chuck Yeager was, he was not a baseball player. He was not the lead guitar player for a hair band. He was the first person to break the sound barrier back in the 40s, and he was the test pilot for all those years, and he was also an ace back in World War II flying P-51 Mustangs. That's just a few of the things. If you ever saw the movie The Right Stuff, it's a story about not only the Mercury 7 astronauts, but mostly about Chuck Yeager and it was actually really well done. So he is somebody that you probably should learn the history of. He was quite a guy, did a lot of stuff. The only thing that I can say about Chuck Yeager is he is one of those people that I always wanted to meet, and I never got a chance to. And the sad thing is I probably could have if I would have really pursued it. I just didn't. That's one of the things I want to tell you guys. If there's something out there, somebody that you want to meet, or something that you want to build, or something you want to do, don't wait around. Get on it and start moving toward it, because you just never know how long that opportunity is going to be there, whether it's a vehicle or a person or whatever. I sat down and talked with the legendary Les Paul on the phone. We were going to do a thing on the show with him. He was 93 years old, and he even invited me to come and sit in with him over there when he was playing at the club in New York. And 3 months later, he was gone. I just didn't have an opportunity. We were in the middle of production, and I didn't get out there. So there's plenty of situations like that I've got, and I'm sure that you guys have them too. So I just want to encourage you, if there's something you've been thinking about doing, especially building a car, getting a project, or taking on something, or learning how to weld, or learning how to do something, man, do it. Quit putting it off. Stop it. That's why we keep telling you, get out there and do something. You'll never regret doing it, but you will regret not doing it. I will always regret not having a chance to shake Chuck Yeager's hand. All right, I've got a question for you guys. What is the most important tool in your garage? All right, I know you're thinking. Come on. Give me, yeah, all right. All right, well, it's probably the one you use the most. And that would be your sockets, your ratchets, your screwdrivers, and your wrenches. And if you want quality tools there, you probably ought to check out somebody like Cornwell. Now, granted, you can get some cheaper tools. And honestly, there's a place for those ones that you want to bend up and heat and go into certain places, and those screwdrivers you don't mind screwing up. Well, that's where you get the cheap stuff. But if you want real quality tools that are going to last and have a warranty, that's where you need to check out somebody like Cornwell. They've been doing it forever, and believe me, you do get what you pay for. All right, I have a question here from Bobby, and Bobby is saying, hey, Stacey, I'm trying to get into metal fabrication here, and I'm wondering, what is the best metal to work with? Do you prefer to work with aluminum or steel or what? Good question, Bobby. I tell you what, I like to work with all metal. I just love metal. Obviously, the biggest ones that you're gonna deal with are steel and aluminum. Generally, for my structural stuff, I usually work with steel. And then for my trim pieces, things like that, I use aluminum or stainless. I've done some structural aluminum things because aluminum brushes out really nice. And it's really easy to bend and stretch and move, especially if you get it annealed just right. I mean, you can almost bend it with your fingers. Not to say that steel is not easy to work with as well. You know, that's what I started working with. And of course, the welding of steel is a little different process than welding of aluminum, so you need to understand both of those. But I would recommend that you learn how to work them both. They're similar enough that the metal stretching and bending and shaping techniques, you'll use the same tools. But I would recommend that you just get some basic metalworking tools. Woodward Fab has got a great selection of them. They're not too expensive. I'm talking, you know, body hammers, shrinker stretchers, mallets, sandbags, those kind of things. I am of the school of, if you're going to buy a tool, buy a good one. You know, it doesn't mean you have to buy the most expensive one, but don't buy that cheap thing either, because it's not going to last you long. And especially when it comes to metal shaping, you want good tools or they're not going to shape good. You know, get something with some quality behind it. And there's plenty of companies out there that, you know, have metalworking machines, tools. There's Bailey's, there's Dake, there's Woodward Fab. You know, there's a lot of companies out there that carry big tools, shop tools, smaller things, hand tools. You can start very simply. You know, when I first started building cars, I had basically about 3 dollies and about 3 hammers that had different tips on them and different ends, and pretty much all of the metal shaping, dent fixing and stuff that I would do, I use those. And then over the years, as I discovered more tools that made life easier, obviously I invested in them. Ron Covell is a good friend of mine, and he's got a great line of metal shaping tools, and all of his stuff is really good. And he's got some great videos too that you may want to check out. So I encourage you to get out there and learn how to do it. Man, once you start working with metal and you see how it moves and how you can move it around. It'll get hold of you, and pretty soon you're a metal guy, and that's it. You know, one question I get a lot, I've got a couple of them right here in front of me. Guys are asking about, you know, what's the best project vehicle to get? Man, that is a loaded question. I don't know what you mean by the best. The easiest, the cheapest, the most, you know, that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck, something I can resell and make money off of. There's a lot of different things there. As I've said before, if you're looking for a project vehicle and you're kind of a first timer and you want to get into something, start getting your feet wet, restoring, working on a vehicle. First of all, I would recommend a truck because those are generally cheaper and there's a lot of places you can buy parts. And people don't really care about a truck. You can kind of beat them up and you can drive them beat up and they're cool. You drive a beat up car, people are like, oh, come on, dude, fix the car. And right now, when you start getting to vintage trucks or vintage cars from the 50s, 60s, 70s, that kind of thing, well, those have a collectability, so they're expensive. And they're far enough back where you're starting to have to deal with rust, you know, bad motors and all that other kind of thing. So if you're a beginner, I recommend something from like 1990 to about 05 to 010. Let's just say that 20 years right there, especially, you know, through the 2000s, because there's a lot of things there that you get that have high mileage. You can get them for cheap, man, $2,000, $1,500. Generally, they have a good body. Look for something where you're not having to get into rust replacement, unless that's your thing. If you want to work on rust, you can find plenty of that. You know, look for something grading brakes, or you're fixing an engine, or you're doing a transmission, you're doing some wiring, maybe changing the interior out. That's really satisfying, and it will teach you how to do things that will then encourage you to go to the next step. And then after you've done a few of these, you're ready to jump into something. Hopefully you've built up something that has some money in it that you can get some money out of, so then you can go after what you would consider more of a dream project, a 69 Camaro, or a, you know, that car or truck that you've always wanted, and you have the skills and the money to actually put it together. That's what I'd recommend. And man, don't be afraid to dig into what you like. You know, don't let other people tell you what you think is cool. If you like it, if you like a Pinto, you know, then get one, you know, and do your thing to it. What has been your closest call when you're out messing around with cars and trucks? And I've had a lot of them. I've got a whole book coming out about these crazy things that have happened with animals and situations and all that kind of thing. But one of the reasons that I'm always stressing safety is I've had a lot of really, really close calls. I probably should have been dead many, many times, but by the grace of God, I'm still alive. Here was one, probably one of the closest calls. I used to restore and race old Z cars. And this was back before I started doing trucks and when I had my shop. I had several old Zs, you know, and I was pulling the rear end out of an old 240 in the backyard. I jacked up the rear end. I was dropping the whole rear end out of the car because I was taking that independent rear end out. So I jacked it up and I put it on jack stands, and the jack stands were on little pieces of wood down in the dirt. I hadn't put big enough pieces of wood under the jack stands, and the ground was kind of wet. So anyway, I'm out there and I have the rear end out from under the car, and I've got my tools everywhere, and I'm laying on a piece of cardboard, you know, doing my thing. And I just happen to look over and I see the jack is starting to tilt forward. In other words, the car is starting to slide off of the jack. The jack is digging into the ground in the front, the ones on either side, and the car is starting to come off those jacks. And I'm laying under it, keep in mind, in the back. I happen to look at just the right time and see it slowly starting to go there. So I reach up and I grab the bottom of the car and I'm holding the car in place. Okay, now picture this. I'm laying under the car, holding the car from sliding forward off the jack stands and crushing me, and I'm underneath it, and now I have to plan an exit. Okay, so my toolbox is right beside my side, so it's in the way. So as I hold the car up with one hand, I'm kicking at my toolbox and all the junk that's in the way in the rear end, clearing me a path, because I know I have to get out from under this thing before it tumbles off the jack. Then I, you know, do the, okay, 1, 2, 3 and go kind of thing. You know, making sure that I'm not going to hook my shirt or my belt on something. I can't get out from under this car. So I let go of it and slide out from under the car, and I had more time than I thought. I got out from under the car and it slowly went forward as those jacks dug into the ground, and the car crashed down on the ground, flat. You know, it would have just crushed me. So I was like, wow,
You know, I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot about being vigilant. I learned a lot about over-planning and not getting in a hurry. And even though, you know, I thought I had planned right, I had still overlooked a couple of things. So that's why I try to encourage people that, I mean, you could be out working on something and having a great time, and all of a sudden you got a serious problem. So I just encourage people to be really careful and think ahead and plan ahead. It's like, you know, one of the funniest things that happens to car people is that you can go out and get this, drag a car out of a field, and you'll drag home everything that's in that car, including snakes and possums and all kinds of things. And the worst thing you can do is put that car in your garage and let it sit, because all those critters come out and they get to those nice warm places like around your hot water heater, and then they wait for you to come down in the garage and start working on the car. And I've seen snakes, all kinds of stuff in people's houses because of that. So what you do is when you get a car, a truck, a project vehicle, let it sit outside for a while and go out there and do the rain dance around it and bang on it with things and scare stuff out of it and let them get out of there. And then try to go through it with a broom handle under the seats and all kinds of stuff. Scare that stuff out of there so you don't drag some nasty thing into your house. Oh, the adventures of a car guy. Here's a question that came in from Andrew. He said, hey, Stacey, what is your most unique experience in doing the TV shows and stuff over the years? It's like, wow, how do I pick just one? There's been some really crazy things that have happened. I'd say probably one of the most unique things was right around 9/11. We were out doing a story on the Bradley fighting vehicle. And if you don't know what that is, that's basically a tank. It's a personnel carrier that the military uses. And we were doing a story on it, and we had clearance out there at the base, and we were out there doing our thing, and we were on the testing ground. And of course we were out there, and there were a couple of generals sitting out there that came out to visit. I think they wanted to get on camera, which they eventually did. So they were just hanging out, and they were in their little Jeep putting around. So the guy that's driving the Bradley, he's going to bring it in and go through this big mud hole with it. And it's kind of around a curve. He's like, how fast do you want me to go? I said, man, bring the heat, you know, turn that thing on. Now those Bradleys will run about 60 miles an hour. You know, he goes, all right, we'll do it, man. So he backs down there, and I hear the thing off, and the Bradley sounds like a locomotive. They're a diesel electric, and they rumble the ground because they're so heavy. So it's just like a train is coming when you hear it coming. So anyway, he's going off in the distance, and he's getting ready to come. And I look over there, and the generals have been sitting right there at the apex of the corner in their Jeep. And they get in the Jeep, and they start moving. So I go over there, and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, we're moving. And I'm like, well, why are you moving? And they said, oh, well, we've seen guys roll those Bradleys before. And I'm like, what? How do you roll a Bradley? And they're like, yeah, if they come in too hot and go into a corner and they drop it down into like a ditch or something, yeah, you can roll those things. And he said, it's quite a sight. He said, we hope these guys don't do it, but we don't want to be there where they're going to roll it if they do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, this could be awesome. And I'm sitting there going, okay, you still want to do this? They're like, yeah, go ahead. So anyway, we call the guy that we're ready, and here he comes. And man, it sounds like thunder. I can't imagine what it sounds like with those things coming in if, you know, if you're under attack. But pretty soon he breaks through the trees, and here he comes. He drifts that thing sideways into that mud hole. It was just amazing footage. And he didn't roll it over. It was great. He didn't throw a track, didn't do anything crazy. It was just great footage. It just made me laugh on how these guys get out, you military guys. And I've had a lot of guys share stories on they get their vehicles out, and on the government's dime, they tear things up. It's a good thing that I never made it in the military, man. I'd have tore up so much stuff. And I got in there, I was talking to the driver, and I said, hey, you know, can I drive this thing? He said, well, not supposed to let you do it because you're not military. I said, okay, I'm fine with that. So we went through the day. When we were all finished, he said, you want to drive this thing? And I'm like, are you kidding? He said, here, you know, put the helmet on. So we jump in, and he lets me drive it around, and it was really cool. The unique thing about the Bradley, see, I've driven a lot of tanks and tracked vehicles and stuff, and I was used to the old twin stick, skid steer style dozer type thing where you block a track And the Bradley has a yoke in it, you know, just like a steering yoke, so it was very easy to drive. It didn't even feel like the tanks of old, but it was a fun day.
All right, that's it for today. Once again, we're brought to you by Cornwell Tools. Have a great day and get out there and work on something.